At 70 years old, I thought my biggest battle was recovering from a mild stroke. Lying in a hospital bed, I trusted my son-in-law when he handed me what he called a health paper. But hidden in the fine print, it wasn't just about my care, it was about my money and my house. Before I go on, how are you doing today? I hope your health is steady. If this story speaks to you, stay with me till the end. And if you'd like, leave a comment or subscribe. It lets me know I'm not speaking into the void. I remember the smell of antiseptic more than anything else. The sharp sting of it clung to the air, mixing with the faint beeping of the heart monitor beside me. Every few minutes, a nurse would walk past the open door shoes squeaking on polished linoleum floors. That sound, steady and cold, reminded me I was in a place where lives were measured by machines. The stroke had been mild, the doctors said. They assured me I was lucky that I could still talk, still think, still walk with a little help. But lying in that narrow bed, wires taped to my chest, I didn't feel lucky. I felt vulnerable. For the first time in 70 years, I wasn't in control of my own body, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I had always been a careful man. When my wife was alive, we handled everything together. We double-checked bills, read the fine print on every form, argued with banks over small charges. She used to joke that I was paranoid, but I called it being responsible. It's why we never fell into debt, why we managed to pay off most of our mortgage before she passed. But that day, sitting weak in the hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile white walls, I wasn't the same man. I was tired, confused by the endless forms the hospital handed me. Packets for Medicare coverage, advance directives, releases for tests, each one thicker than the last, each with tiny letters I could barely read without my glasses. The stack sat on the rolling tray beside my bed, papers clipped together, waiting for signatures. Even for a man like me, someone who never signed anything without reading it twice, the sheer volume was overwhelming. That's when he walked in, my son-in-law. Sharp suit, polished shoes, a folder tucked under his arm as if he'd just stepped out of an office meeting. He had always been smooth with his words. A financial advisor by trade, he knew how to talk about money, paperwork, investments. When he first married my daughter, I felt relieved. I thought, good, she'll be taken care of. He knows how the world works. Now he stood at the foot of my bed, a smile on his face that looked almost too rehearsed. Dad? He said he always called me Dad, though it sometimes felt more like strategy than affection. I brought a form from the hospital, just a health paper. It's routine, but we need to get it signed so doctors can act quickly if anything happens. He slid the folder onto the tray and opened it. The pages inside looked like the rest of the hospital stack, dense text, small print, long sentences designed to exhaust you into obedience. I frowned. This looks longer than what I signed when your mom was sick. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if we were conspiring together. Things have changed, Dad. Hospitals have more policies now, more liabilities, but it's all standard. It just makes sure someone can make decisions if you can't speak for yourself. His words sounded reasonable, too reasonable. I turned the first page, scanning the bold headings, authority, decision-making, rights, responsibilities. It all blurred together, paragraphs swimming in front of my tired eyes. My eldest daughter stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She looked worried, but not at the paper, at me. Dad, maybe it's just precaution. You scared us with that stroke. If this helps the doctors keep you safe, maybe you should sign. I looked from her face to his. Her eyes were gentle, filled with concern, while his held that steady, professional calm. 2 against 1. And me stuck in bed, too tired to argue. I don't like this, I muttered. I don't sign things I don't understand. You don't have to worry, he said smoothly. I'll take care of it. You trust me, right? That line hit me harder than the stroke. You trust me. It was the kind of phrase designed to corner you, to make you feel guilty if you said no. I hesitated. My daughter shifted closer, her voice soft. Dad, please, just for peace of mind. I thought about my other daughter, the younger one, who lived states away. She wasn't here to give her opinion. She wasn't here to stand beside me. And maybe that's why I gave in, because at that moment, I didn't want to disappoint the only child standing at my bedside. I picked up the pen. My hand shook as I signed, the ink scratching across the bottom of the page. My daughter exhaled in relief, and my son-in-law smiled, sliding the paper back into the folder with practiced ease. Good. That's settled, he said. Settled. The word echoed in my ears long after they left the room. That night I couldn't sleep. The machines beeped steadily. The hallway lights cast long shadows into my room, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that paper. The fine print I hadn't read. The calm smile of my son-in-law as he took it away. Something about it gnawed at me, pulling me back into memories I had tried to bury memories of when paperwork nearly cost us everything. Setup. Part 2. 800. 2. The next morning, a nurse brought in another stack of forms. She set them on the tray without much thought, her voice brisk. "Mr. Harris, just the usual Medicare updates. Take your time." I stared at the pile. Pages of codes, coverage notices, and disclaimers filled with words only lawyers or insurance agents seem to understand. In bold letters across one page it read, "Non-covered services may result in personal financial responsibility." The fine print ran like an endless stream beneath it, warning me that one mistake could drain my savings. I sighed. My wife and I had dealt with these papers years ago when she got sick. I remembered sitting at our kitchen table late into the night, glasses on my nosepen in hand, going through every line while she teased me for being obsessive. "Bill, you're not buying the hospital. You're just filling out a form." But I insisted because I knew that one careless signature could cost us. Now here I was without her, without the energy to fight the paper war. And that's what it felt like, a war. When my eldest daughter came back that afternoon, I asked her, "Did you read that paper I signed yesterday?" She shook her head. "No, Dad. I just trusted him. He said it was for health decisions only." That word again. Trusted. I wanted to believe it, but doubt scratched at the edges of my mind. "You should have read it," I muttered. Her face crumpled hurt. "I thought it was safe. He knows about these things, Dad. He does finance. I didn't think it was dangerous. I didn't push further." I saw the conflict in her eyes, the way she wanted to defend her husband and care for me at the same time. It wasn't her I was angry with. It was the situation, the timing, the way life always seemed to test you when you were at your weakest. That night, as I shifted restlessly in bed, I reached for the phone on the bedside table. My hand trembled as I dialed my younger daughter's number. She answered groggily. It was late where she was. "Dad. Are you okay? Do I need to come?" Her voice steadied me more than the medication ever could. "No, sweetheart. I just wanted to hear you. I'm fine. Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I almost told her about the paper, about the nagging worry gnawing at my gut. Yet something in me hesitated. I didn't want to worry her unnecessarily, not when she was so far away. Instead, I said, "Take care of yourself. Okay? Don't skip meals." She laughed softly, the way her mother used to when I fussed too much. "Dad, you're the one in the hospital, not me. But I'll eat. I promise." After we hung up, I lay staring at the ceiling. The room was dark except for the glow of the monitor. I could still see the faint outline of the pen stroke I had made on that form, burned into my memory. By the time morning came, I had convinced myself I was overthinking it. Hospitals buried everything in fine print. Maybe this was just another precaution. But deep inside, I knew better. I knew that when something doesn't feel right, it usually isn't. And soon enough, I would learn just how right my instincts were, because that health paper was never just about health. Lying in that hospital bed, I could feel the weight of the silence pressing in. The machines beeped in their regular rhythm, but my mind was anywhere but here. My thoughts drifted back to the years Anna and I spent building a life together. The house, the memories, the things I promised her. I could see her standing in the kitchen laughing softly as she watched me go over the bills again. "Bill, you're acting like we're buying the whole hospital," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Just sign it." But I never just signed. That wasn't how I was raised. Every form, every piece of paper, I read it like it was my lifeline. Anna always teased me for it, but it saved us more than once. There was that one time, for example, when we were renewing our insurance, and I found a hidden clause that would have cost us thousands. I refused to sign it, and Anna always said I saved us from being taken advantage of. She had her ways too, like the shoebox she kept under our bed. It was full of receipts, old bills, and papers from years past. I used to joke that she was a hoarder, but I never threw away a single thing she kept. I couldn't, because everything she saved was something important, something we needed at just the right time. Like that old furnace receipt when the repair company tried to charge us twice. She had it right there in that shoebox, and we avoided a huge bill because of it. When Anna passed, everything changed. The house felt emptier than it ever had. There was no more rustling of papers, no more soft laughter in the kitchen. Just silence. And me. Alone. I kept the house, of course. It wasn't just walls and roof to me. It was a symbol of everything Anna and I built together. I'd always say, "This is our home, not just a house," and she'd smile and say, "No, Bill, this is home." We made it. I kept busy after she passed, repainting shutters, fixing things that didn't need fixing. Every January, I'd pin the property tax notice to the fridge right under the rooster magnet like I was still in control. Everything was routine, but the routine was all I had left. Sarah, my oldest daughter, would call and tell me I needed to downsize. I could hear the concern in her voice. The house was too big, she said. The property taxes were getting higher. It wasn't a bad idea, but I couldn't bear the thought of leaving. This house had so many memories, too many years of work. To sell it would feel like losing everything Anna and I had built together. But Emily, my youngest, never once suggested we sell. When she came home from college, she always asked, "What needs fixing, Dad?" She helped me plant tomatoes in the garden, fix the porch swing when it started to squeak, and sat with me in the evenings when the house felt too quiet. I knew Emily would never ask me to give this place up. She understood it like I did. It wasn't just the walls that made this house. It was the memories. I kept things in order. I paid the bills on time, kept my calendar filled with appointments, highlighted the due dates. But there was always something gnawing at me, some feeling I couldn't shake. The world was changing, but I kept hoping it wouldn't touch us here. I thought I could protect this house forever, just as Anna had. Then came the call. I'd had a stroke, they said, mild but still enough to knock me off my feet. I was in and out of it, but when I woke up, Michael was sitting next to me, that damn folder in his hands. "Dad, it's just a health form. I need you to sign it so we can take care of things," he said, his voice too smooth, too rehearsed. It felt like I was in a dream. My mind was foggy, my body weak. I didn't understand it at first. I just wanted to get better, to go home. But something about the way Michael kept pushing his insistence that I needed to sign didn't sit right with me. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Bill," Michael said, his voice rising with impatience. "Everyone signs it. It's standard." I could see Sarah standing behind him, her face tense, her eyes shifting between me and Michael. It was clear she didn't want to fight, but she didn't know what I knew. She didn't see what was happening. I wasn't sure I did either, but something told me I shouldn't sign that paper. Something told me that by signing it, I was giving away more than just control over my health. But in my exhaustion and my fear, I signed, and then just like that, it was done. I didn't know at the time, but Michael had slipped in more than just health care. There were other lines added. Lines about my finances, my property, my house. He'd gotten me to sign away everything I'd worked for, everything Anna and I had built. I couldn't help but think of Anna, then her voice echoing in my mind, "Don't sign anything unless you're sure." I had broken that promise to her, and now I had no idea how to undo it. Backstory Part 2. A few days later, I sat in the hospital room staring at the blank walls. My head ached, my body felt heavy, and the reality of the situation was sinking in. Michael had convinced me to sign away control, but what if it was too late to reverse? What if I had lost everything, my house, my savings, everything I'd worked for my entire life? The thought of Michael taking it all from me gnawed at me. He always had that air about him, smooth, confident, self-assured. But I wasn't the same man I was before. I wasn't going to let him take everything, even if I had signed something in my weakened state. The door creaked open, and Sarah stepped in, looking more serious than I'd seen her in years. She was holding a stack of papers in her hands, but when she saw my face, she stopped, hesitation in her eyes. "Dad, how are you feeling?" she asked softly. I could hear the worry in her voice, but it wasn't enough. I needed her to see what I saw, to realize what was happening. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me," I said, my voice hoarse but steady. "I signed something I shouldn't have. Michael had me sign a form for my health, but there's more to it. It's not just a healthcare form, Sarah. There's stuff in there about my house, my property, everything." She stood still for a moment, taking it in. The room seemed to close in around us. Then her face hardened, her hands clenching into fists. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "I didn't know, Sarah. I didn't know what I was signing. I was tired, confused." And Michael kept pushing. Her eyes darted down to the stack of papers she was holding. She placed them on the bed and sat next to me, her hands trembling slightly. "Dad, I didn't know. I should have known." I looked at her, the guilt in her voice pulling at my heart. "It's not your fault, but you need to see what's going on." Michael's been taking advantage of me, of all of us. I'll fix this, I swear. I'll get him to undo it. We'll get it back. She was saying the words, but they didn't sound real. I shook my head. Sarah, it's not that simple. It's already done. The papers are signed, and I don't know what Michael's planning next. She fell silent, her face pale. I could see the regret on her face, but it wasn't enough. Regret wasn't going to change anything. Maybe you can fix it, I added quietly. Maybe you can fix this for me. Sarah swallowed hard, then wiped her eyes. I will, Dad. I promise, but I need your help. I nodded slowly, but deep down I wasn't sure there was anything left to save. The next day, things changed. Anita, the nurse who had been with us during Anna's illness, came by with a quiet smile on her face. She didn't say much at first, just checked my vitals and adjusted the machines. But then she leaned in and whispered, Bill, I've been looking into your case. I think we might have a way out of this. I blinked, confused. What do you mean, Michael's papers, Bill? I'm pretty sure there's been some tampering, Anita said, her voice low. I've got a copy of the original healthcare proxy, the one you signed when you were admitted. If we compare it to the one Michael has, there's a clear difference. My heart skipped a beat. Are you sure? She nodded. I've seen these forms before, Bill. I'm sure of it. Where is it? I asked, urgency flooding my chest. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. Inside was the original form, the one I had signed when I was first admitted. I glanced at it, then looked up at Anita. This is it, I whispered. The signature's clean, she said, tapping the paper gently. But if we match it to the version Michael has, we'll see the extra lines added. The lines about your finances, the house. I stared at the paper, my mind racing. If we could prove that the documents had been altered after the fact, Michael could be in real trouble. Do you have copies of the altered forms? I asked, my voice steady now. Anita nodded. I can get them for you. It's just a matter of time. But we have to act fast. That evening, the hospital administrators called me in for a meeting. They had seen the altered forms and they were taking action. This wasn't just a matter of misplaced paperwork anymore. They had flagged it as possible fraud, and the authorities were getting involved. I could hardly believe it. All this time I had thought I was powerless. I had signed that paper without understanding the consequences. But now I had a chance. Emily was with me in the meeting, and as the administrators laid out their findings, I could see the weight lifting from her shoulders. She was finally starting to understand the full extent of Michael's betrayal. She turned to me, a new resolve in her eyes. We're going to make this right, Dad, she said, her voice filled with determination. We're going to fix this. The administrators assured me they would begin an investigation and refer the case to the state for review. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the first real step toward regaining control. That night, Sarah came by again. This time, her eyes weren't full of regret. They were full of determination. I've been talking to a lawyer, she said, her voice steady. And we're going to make sure Michael is held accountable. I'll stand by you, Dad, whatever it takes. I looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She had done something I hadn't expected. She had taken responsibility for what had happened, and now she was doing everything in her power to help me. I reached out and squeezed her hand. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for standing with me. I should have done it sooner, she said quietly. You're doing it now, I said, smiling weakly, and that's what matters. But even as I spoke the words, I knew that the battle was far from over. Michael hadn't given up yet. The next day, Michael came back to the hospital, but this time there was no smug smile, no arrogant confidence. Instead, he seemed anxious. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this, he said, his voice strained. It's all been sorted. The house is mine now, Bill. I'm trying to help you. I could hear the desperation in his voice. He wasn't used to being challenged. He wasn't used to losing. It's not about the house, Michael. I said, my voice steady. It's about doing what's right. For once in your life, you need to stop pretending you know what's best for everyone else. He froze, his face going pale. I could see the walls he had built around himself start to crack. I'm not done with you yet, he muttered, but there was no conviction in his words. I'm done with you, Michael, I replied. You've lost. The next morning, I woke up to the harsh sound of beeping machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic. My body felt fragile, every muscle aching, but my mind was sharp. I knew something had changed. Something had snapped inside me, and I wasn't going to let Michael take everything I'd worked for. When Michael walked into the room, his usual smug smile greeted me like he'd already won. He sat down at my bedside as if this was some routine conversation. "Good morning, Dad," he said, his voice sweet like honey. "I'm glad you're up. I've taken care of everything. The house, the bank accounts. It'll all be in order soon. We'll make things easier for you." I didn't even look at the folder he slid onto the table. The last few days had been a blur of confusion and exhaustion, but now that the fog was lifting, I could see things more clearly. Michael was trying to manipulate me, and I wasn't having it. "No, Michael," I said firmly, my voice steady. "You've done nothing but try to take everything from me. I'm not signing anything else." Michael's smile faltered for just a moment, but he quickly masked it with another smooth reply. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly. This is for your own good. You've been in and out of the hospital and you can't keep track of everything. It's easier this way." I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. "This isn't for my good, Michael. This is about control. You're trying to take my house, my money, everything I've built." Emily, who had been standing by the door, stepped forward. She had been quiet until then, but her eyes were burning with anger. "Don't listen to him, Dad," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "He's lying to you." Michael turned to her, a flash of annoyance crossing his face, but it quickly vanished. "You're just as bad as him, Emily. I'm trying to protect all of us. This is the way things need to be. I'm not a fool, Michael," I said, cutting him off. "And neither is Emily. This is about you trying to take everything for yourself." Michael's expression turned cold. "You'll regret this, Bill. You've made your choice, but it's not going to end the way you think." Just as Michael was about to say something else, Anita walked into the room. She was one of the nurses who had helped care for Anna, and I trusted her more than anyone else here. Her calm presence was a welcome relief. "Bill," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. "I've been looking into your case. I think I can help." Michael looked at her, a frown forming. "What do you mean?" Anita didn't acknowledge him, keeping her focus on me. "I've seen the original healthcare form you signed. There's a mistake here, Michael. A big one." Michael's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Anita handed me the original form. "You signed this when you came in, Bill. This is the real deal. There's no mention of finances or property. But I've seen the version that Michael has been showing around, and it's different. They've added extra clauses specifically about your assets." My heart skipped a beat. The truth was right there in front of me. I'd been tricked, but now I had proof. "You've been caught, Michael," I said, finally able to look him in the eye without fear. Michael's face turned pale. "This is just a misunderstanding," he tried to say, but his words faltered. "Misunderstanding." Emily scoffed. "You've been lying to us the entire time, Michael." I could see it in his eyes. He was desperate, but there was no way out for him now. We had the evidence. We had the proof. The next day, the hospital administrators met with me to discuss the situation. They had already seen the forms, and they were taking the case seriously. The word fraud was mentioned. I could hardly believe it. For so long I had felt powerless, but now the pieces were finally falling into place. Michael wasn't going to get away with it. Not this time. That evening I sat down with Emily and Sarah to talk about the next steps. Michael thought he could get away with it, but we've got him, Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "I never thought it would go this far." Sarah whispered, her face pale. "But now we know the truth. We can make it right." I nodded. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of relief. Michael had underestimated us, and now the truth was coming out. That evening, after the investigation began, I received another shocking piece of news. Anita had come by again, this time with a stack of papers in her hand. "I've been doing some digging," she said, her voice tense. "Michael isn't just in trouble for altering the forms. There's more. He's in debt, a lot of debt, and it's all going to come out." I stared at her in disbelief. "What do you mean he's been borrowing money under false pretenses, taking out loans against assets that weren't his?" Anita explained. "The FBI is already looking into it. His finances are a mess." My heart pounded. Michael had been lying, stealing, and manipulating everything, and now it was all coming to light. I barely had time to process what Anita had just told me before the next bombshell hit. The hospital administrators were moving quickly now, and the FBI was getting involved. Michael's entire financial history was under scrutiny. His attempts to cover up his actions were unraveling, and the walls were closing in on him. But there was something else. Something I hadn't expected. As the investigation progressed, they uncovered hidden debts Michael had been keeping from us, debts that were tied to illegal loans and fraudulent dealings. This was bigger than just a fraudulent document. Michael had been living a double life, borrowing money and making deals under the table. This was no longer just a case of a son trying to take control of his father's assets. Michael had been playing a dangerous game, and now he was going to pay the price. Days passed in a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and tension. Michael wasn't going to back down. His arrogance still burned bright despite the cracks that had started to show. He was trying to hold on to his illusion of control, but it was slipping from his grasp. I sat at the kitchen table one evening, going over some old documents I'd found tucked away in a drawer. They were old receipts, nothing important at first glance. But as I sifted through them, something caught my eye. A set of papers. Anna had kept ones I hadn't seen in years. They were about the house, about the mortgage we had paid off together, about the life we had shared. I didn't know why I had kept them, why I had held on to these small, insignificant pieces of paper. But in that moment, they felt like a symbol of something larger. A reminder that everything Michael was trying to take wasn't just a house. It was our home, our family. Emily and Sarah had been talking to lawyers, gathering evidence and preparing to fight Michael in court. Anita had been a huge help too, getting us the video footage and digging deeper into Michael's finances. The FBI was involved now, and Michael was facing not just a legal battle over the documents, but an investigation into his debts and illegal activities. The following day, I met with my lawyer to go over everything. I'd seen the footage from the hospital cameras. Michael had been caught red-handed, altering the forms, adding extra clauses for financial control. But now the investigation into his finances was moving faster than we expected. He had hidden debts, massive debts that he couldn't explain, and the FBI was beginning to dig into his criminal activities. His entire life had been a lie, and he was about to pay the price. "You've done the right thing by coming forward," my lawyer said. "We're going to get this all sorted, but you need to stay strong. Michael is going to fight back, and he'll try everything to discredit you." I nodded, but the weight of it all was starting to hit me. I had never imagined things would go this far. I just wanted to protect my family, to keep the house that Anna and I had built together. But now it was bigger than that. It was about justice. That evening, as I sat in my chair by the window, Sarah came in. She looked more tired than I had ever seen her, her eyes swollen from days of stress. She sat down next to me and took a deep breath. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "This whole thing with Michael, it's tearing me apart." I put my hand on hers, trying to reassure her. "I know, Sarah. It's not easy. But we're doing this together. We'll get through it." She wiped away a tear, then looked up at me, her eyes full of determination. "I can't stand the thought of losing everything, Dad. I don't want to lose you, and I don't want to lose the house. I won't let Michael take it from us." I could see the change in her, the resolve that had been missing when this all started. She wasn't the same person who had signed that document out of fear. She was stronger now, and I could see it in the way she looked at me. "I won't let him take it either," I said quietly, my voice full of conviction. "This house is ours. Anna and I built it together, and I'm not going to let anyone take it away." The next day, we received the news that would change everything. The FBI had uncovered something even bigger than Michael's debts. They had traced his actions back to a series of illegal loan applications, many of which he had taken out in the names of others, including my own. The amount was staggering, millions of dollars in loans he had never repaid, all of which were tied to the property and assets he had been trying to seize from me. The shockwaves of this revelation rippled through the investigation. Michael had not only been trying to take everything from me, but he had also been using fraudulent means to keep himself afloat. His entire empire was built on lies, and now it was coming down piece by piece. The media caught wind of the story, and it spread like wildfire. The local news stations were broadcasting details of Michael's financial schemes, and the story of a son attempting to steal from his own father was making headlines. Public outrage grew, and it became clear that Michael's reputation was tarnished beyond repair. Then came the final blow. As the investigation deepened, we found out that Michael had been lying to us about something even bigger. The original healthcare proxy form I had signed wasn't just altered for financial control. It had been tampered with after I had signed it, but the most shocking revelation was that Michael had attempted to sell the house without my knowledge. He had already made arrangements with a buyer, someone who had offered him a substantial sum for the property. He had been planning to cash out, steal everything from me, and walk away with it. The evidence was clear, and the buyer was already being investigated. When I saw the full scope of Michael's betrayal, I couldn't hold back my anger. It wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about everything he had done, using me, betraying my trust, and trying to rob me of everything I had worked for. But the worst part was still coming. Sarah had been holding on to a secret. When I saw her again that evening, she was different. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't feeling sorry for herself. She was ready to do what she had been avoiding all along. "I need to tell you something, Dad," she said, sitting down beside me. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked. Noticing the seriousness in her tone, I spoke to Michael today," she said, her voice steady now. "I told him everything. I told him what I knew about the forms. I told him that I knew he was lying." I sat up straighter, my heart pounding. "You did what I told him, the truth, Dad. I couldn't let him keep doing this anymore. I couldn't be a part of it." The weight of what Sarah had just said hit me like a ton of bricks. My daughter had just turned against her husband, the man she had stood by for so long. And in doing so, she had freed herself from the chains he had placed around her. When the room finally emptied that night, I was left with the steady beep of the heart monitor and the sound of Emily breathing softly in the chair beside me. She had fallen asleep with her arms folded, chin resting on her chest. Sarah had gone home silent and shaken. Michael was long gone, probably making calls, already planning what he thought was his victory lap. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how I, a man who had lived 70 years reading every bill twice, ended up signing the one paper that betrayed everything I stood for. Trust. That word kept echoing in my head. People talk about love as the glue of family, but in truth, trust is the skeleton. Without it, nothing stands. Anna and I built our marriage on trust, not blind trust, earned trust. She trusted me to guard us from fine print, and I trusted her to remember the details I forgot. She trusted me to keep the roof from leaking, and I trusted her to keep our children fed and loved. When one of us stumbled, the other held the line. But now, lying in a hospital bed, I realized how easily trust can be weaponized. Michael wore it like a mask. He smiled, spoke calmly, and wrapped poison in the language of care. And Sarah, my own daughter, handed me that mask believing it was a shield. It made me think, is it worse to be betrayed by a stranger or by someone who calls you Dad? The paper said Michael had power. But what hurt more wasn't the ink. It was Sarah's signature right beside mine. My daughter, who had once drawn crooked hearts on my lunch bags, who had held my hand crossing the street. I knew she hadn't meant to betray me, but intention doesn't erase consequence. I wondered what Anna would say if she could see us now. Would she scold Sarah? Would she tell me I was too hard on her? Would she remind me that fear makes people weak, and weakness isn't the same as cruelty? Emily stirred in the chair, opening her eyes. "Dad, you're awake." "I never really slept," I admitted. She leaned closer. "You're thinking about Mom." I nodded. "She told us once, remember, don't let anyone pressure me." She knew this could happen. Emily's eyes glistened. She also told me something else. She said, "If your father ever feels cornered, remind him he's stronger than he thinks." Her words settled in me like a stone finding its place in water. Stronger than I think. Maybe. Or maybe just stubborn. I turned my head toward her. "Emily, sometimes I wonder if I had stayed silent, let him have his way. Would that have been easier for Sarah?" "For you?" She shook her head fiercely. "No, silence isn't peace, Dad. Silence is surrender." I let the thought hang in the air. Silence, surrender, or fight. In the dark, I thought about how many families break not because of storms, but because no one speaks when the storm comes. Papers pile up, decisions get made, people shrug and say, "That's just how it is." And then one day, a man wakes up to find his home no longer his life signed away. I thought about my neighbors. The ones who lost their farms when banks slid papers across their tables. The widow down the street who signed a reverse mortgage and spent her final years renting back her own living room. They didn't fight because they thought they couldn't. I swallowed hard. Maybe that's what Michael was counting on, that an old man in a hospital bed wouldn't fight, that I would lie quietly while the world rearranged itself around my absence. But I wasn't gone yet. I turned to Emily. "You believe we can undo this?" She squeezed my hand. "I don't just believe it. I'll make it happen." Her conviction was like a light in the room. For the first time since I signed that cursed paper, I felt less like a ghost in my own life. Still, a question gnawed at me. I wanted to ask it out loud, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been cornered. I looked at Emily, but my voice carried further, like I was speaking to the walls, to whoever might hear later. When your own blood stands by while someone takes everything you built, what do? Do you stay silent to keep peace? Or do you fight back and risk tearing the family apart? Mini CTA, Chen Tunyin. And maybe you listening now, you face something like this. Maybe not papers and property, but the choice between silence and resistance. Tell me, do you think silence is strength or weakness? Emily's head rested back against the chair. Dad? Mom wouldn't want you to stay quiet. I closed my eyes, remembering Anna's laughter, her shoebox of receipts, her stubborn refusal to waste a penny. No, she wouldn't want silence. She would want truth. But truth, I knew, needed proof. And proof was what I didn't have. Not yet. I drifted in and out of half-sleep, haunted by images of the house, the porch swing, the tomato patch, the pencil marks on the doorframe. Were they already his in some legal ledger? Would he erase them like they were nothing but numbers in a column? I clenched my jaw. No. They were more than numbers. They were lives, and lives don't erase so easily. In the silence of that long night, I made myself a promise. If Michael wanted a fight, I would give him one, not with fists, not even with anger, but with the same stubbornness that saved us before. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every man or woman who ever felt cornered by fine print, who ever felt too weak to lift a pen against the tide. By dawn, I was still awake, but something in me had shifted. The fear was still there, yes, but alongside it was steel. Michael had a piece of paper. I had 70 years of proof that I wasn't as easy to bury as he thought. And though I didn't know it yet, help was already on its way in the form of someone who carried not just sympathy but evidence. Morning light slid through the blinds, striping the hospital floor in pale yellow. Emily had gone downstairs to grab coffee, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I was still turning over the same question in my mind: proof. Without it, Michael's smug declaration, legally it's mine now, would stand unchallenged. Paper trumped memory. Ink outweighed intentions. Then the door cracked open, and a voice I hadn't heard in years drifted in. Bill Harris. I almost didn't believe it when I saw your name on the chart. I looked up. A woman in her 40s, dark hair, pulled back blue scrubs, neat but tired, stood in the doorway holding a clipboard. Her badge read, Nurse Patel. Recognition hit me like a sudden spring breeze. Anita, I said softly. I'll be damned. Back when Anna was sick, Anita had been one of the kind nurses who lingered after hours explaining forms, catching small errors doctors missed. Anna liked her, trusted her. I hadn't seen her in years. She smiled warmly. Still stubborn enough to read every line before signing, I barked a laugh that came out more bitter than I meant. Not stubborn enough, apparently. Her brow furrowed. She stepped closer. What do you mean? I told her. About Michael, about the paper, about the fine print that handed him not just my health decisions, but my house. Her eyes hardened. Bill, that's not what you signed. I was the one who filed your intake paperwork last week. It was a simple medical directive, healthcare proxy only, no financial clauses. My heart stuttered. Are you sure? Positive? I kept a copy in the system. Everything here is time-stamped. If financial authority shows up now, it means someone tampered with the document after the fact. The room tilted. Relief and fury crashed together inside me. Then we have proof, she nodded slowly. I can print the version I filed. It'll show the difference, but you need to be careful. If he's already filed his version with administration, there will be a trail. This could get messy. I gripped the bed rail, the steel cool against my hand. Messy doesn't scare me. Losing everything does. At that moment, Emily returned with 2 cups of coffee. She froze when she saw Anita. Emily, I said, my voice shaking. This is Nurse Patel. She has proof. Emily set the cups down so hard they sloshed over the rims. Proof, Anita explained quickly, her words crisp and sure. Emily's eyes blazed brighter with every sentence. So Michael really did alter Emily whispered. He doctored a legal document. Anita gave a grim nod. Looks that way. Emily looked at me, jaw clenched. Dad, we can fight this. We have her. We have the system copy. He won't get away with it. For the first time in days, I felt my spine straighten like steel returning to a building that had sagged. But then the door swung open again, and Michael strolled in, smile broad phone in hand. "Morning. How's everyone feeling?" Emily's fists curled, but I lifted a hand to stop her. My instinct screamed to lash out to throw Anita's words in his face. But something colder, sharper slid into me instead. Not yet. If I showed my hand too soon, he'd wriggle out spin stories, plant doubt. No better to play the part he expected. An old man, weak-cornered, so I sank back into the bed, forced my face slack, let weariness seep into my voice. "Morning, Michael." He eyed me, perhaps suspicious, then relaxed. "Glad to see you're calm. I was thinking it's time we started planning ahead. Downsizing, maybe selling the house. With me handling the paperwork, it'll be painless." Anita stiffened beside me, but I gave her the smallest shake of my head. "Not yet." Emily nearly exploded. "You smug Emily," I interrupted, my tone tired. "It's fine. He's just trying to help." Her eyes went wide. She caught the flicker in mine, the signal beneath the words, and bit back the rest. Michael, smug as ever, patted the folder on his arm. "See, even your father understands. Change is hard but necessary." He left soon after, humming to himself, leaving the smell of his cologne hanging in the room like smoke after a fire. When the door closed, Emily rounded on me. "Dad, why didn't you tell him off? We have Anita. We have proof." Because I said slowly, if he thinks he's already won, he'll stop watching his back. And that's when we'll strike. Anita's lips curled into a thin smile, still stubborn after all these years. "Good. You'll need that." That evening, when the halls quieted, Anita returned with a printout from the system. She laid 2 documents side by side on my tray. The original intake form, clean, simple healthcare decisions only. The altered 1 extra pages, stapled financial authority included. The difference screamed from the paper. The timestamps proved it. Emily stared at them, then at me. "Dad, this is it. This is the crack in his armor." I nodded. My hands shook as I touched the clean copy almost reverently. It felt like Anna's hand on mine, reminding me carefulness still mattered. Proof still lived. But even as relief washed through me, a deeper resolve began to form. Proof alone wasn't enough. I needed a voice, a witness who could vouch for my state of mind the day I signed. Someone Michael couldn't smear as confused or old, and I knew exactly who that someone was, the doctor who had treated me that day. I didn't say it out loud yet, not to Emily, not even to Anita. But the plan was forming. A quiet, stubborn plan. The next day, Michael returned, his arrogance sharper than ever. He strutted in with Sarah trailing behind, her face pale. "Dad," he said, "I've spoken to the bank. Once the paperwork is fully processed, we'll streamline your accounts. Less hassle for you. You should thank me." I let my shoulders sag, my voice barely above a whisper. "If you say so, Michael." His grin widened. "See, acceptance. That's all I needed." Sarah's eyes flickered between us. Confusion and guilt etched deep. For a moment, I saw her mouth open like she wanted to speak, to object, but fear won and she stayed silent. I said nothing more. "Not yet." When he left, Anita leaned close, her voice low. "He doesn't know. He thinks he's already untouchable." "Good," I said. "Let him think that." Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that the next move was already in play. Not his move, mine. The courtroom was packed with people. Lawyers, reporters, even the hospital administrators had gathered to witness what would undoubtedly be a historic moment. Michael had always seen himself as the one in control, the one who could manipulate every situation to his advantage. But today, that control slipped through his fingers, and he had no idea just how much was about to collapse around him. I sat there feeling a strange calm come over me. Emily and Sarah sat beside me, their faces full of determination. We had fought hard, and now it was time for Michael to face the consequences of his actions. The judge called the case to order, and Michael's lawyer immediately started speaking, attempting to downplay the charges and dismiss the evidence against him. But the more he spoke, the more he realized that the truth was unavoidable. The weight of Michael's lies, his fraudulent schemes, and the trail of deceit he had left behind was about to be exposed for all to see. I stood up slowly, my heart racing but my mind clear. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about making Michael pay for everything he had done. It was about restoring justice, not just for me, but for the whole family. "Your Honor." I began, my voice steady as I addressed the court. I have here the original healthcare proxy form I signed when I was admitted to the hospital. I have proof that it was altered after I signed it, and I have proof of the fraudulent transactions Michael has been hiding from us all. The room went silent as I slid the papers across the table. The judge examined them, then turned to Michael's lawyer. "Is this your client's signature?" the judge asked, his voice cold. Michael's lawyer hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, but no buts," the judge cut him off. "The evidence is clear. This document was altered after it was signed, and the changes made were not authorized." Michael's face turned an ashen color. He had been so sure of himself, so confident that he could manipulate the system, but now his world was crumbling before him. The truth was out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But then, just when I thought the case was won, Sarah stood up. "Dad," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I have something to add." I looked at her, surprised. She had been quiet throughout most of the proceedings, her emotions running high. But now there was something different about her, a resolve that I hadn't seen before. She took a deep breath and looked directly at Michael. "I know what I've done, Michael. I know I let you convince me to sign those papers. I know I stood by you when I should have stood by Dad, but I can't live with that anymore. I can't let you take everything from him. I'm not going to protect you anymore." The courtroom was silent as Sarah's words sank in. Michael's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing in anger. "Sarah, what are you saying?" he spat. "You can't be serious. I'm your husband. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," she replied, her voice steady now, filled with conviction. "I owe my father everything, and I'm not going to sit by and let you destroy him." She turned back to the judge. "I was part of this. I signed the forms, I didn't ask questions, and I let Michael manipulate me. But I'm here now, Your Honor, and I'm telling the truth. I'm here to protect my dad." The judge nodded, taking everything in. Michael sat there, stunned, unable to speak. The room was buzzing now, the weight of Sarah's testimony sinking in. Michael's empire of lies was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But then, as if to add another layer of shock to the situation, Anita stepped forward. She had been quietly watching the proceedings, but now she too had something to say. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but firm, "there's something else you need to know. I've been reviewing some of the hospital records, and I found a few things that could change everything." She pulled out a stack of papers and laid them on the table. As she went over them, she revealed more details about Michael's financial transactions, his hidden debts, and even fraudulent accounts he had opened in my name. But the final blow came when she said, "There's one more thing. I've been in contact with the FBI. They've already opened an investigation into Michael's finances. They've been tracking his transactions for months, and the evidence is overwhelming." Michael's face went pale. His eyes darted around the room, panic creeping into his features. For the first time in months, he looked vulnerable. He wasn't the confident, self-assured man I had once known. He was a man on the verge of losing everything. The judge turned to Michael. "Mr. Harris, you are under investigation by federal authorities. The evidence against you is substantial, and you will be held accountable for your actions." It was over. Michael's scheme had been exposed, and there was nothing left for him to hold on to. His arrogance, his manipulation, his lies, they had all come crashing down. As the court proceedings wrapped up, I couldn't help but feel a weight lift off my shoulders. For so long I had felt trapped, like I was watching my life slip away piece by piece. But now, with Michael's deceit uncovered, there was a sense of justice in the air. I had kept my promise to Anna, and now I could finally move forward. But as I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Sarah standing there, her eyes filled with emotion. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm so sorry. I should have stood by you from the start." I reached out and pulled her into a hug. "It's okay, Sarah. You're here now. That's what matters." She pulled back and smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "We're going to be okay, right?" I smiled back, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. "Yes, Sarah, we're going to be okay." As I walked out of the courtroom, I paused for a moment, looking back at the door. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayals, the lies, the pain. But now I was free, free from Michael, free from the manipulation, free from the fear that had held me back for so long. I kept the promise, Anna, I whispered to myself. I kept it. As the case against Michael closed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The truth had come to light and justice was served. But if you've ever experienced something like this, if you've ever seen someone being forced to sign papers they didn't fully understand, or if you've been in a situation where someone tried to take what was rightfully yours, then you know just how important it is to speak up. If this story hit close to home for you, or if you think it could help someone in your family or community, please share this video. Like, comment, and subscribe to show your support and share your own experiences with us. If you've seen a loved one pressured into signing something they didn't understand, let's raise awareness together. Share this story to warn others and to help stop elder abuse before it happens. Your voice matters. By sharing this, you can make a difference for another family. Let's stand together and make sure no one else has to go through what we did. Thank you for watching.